Today, we're talking about the kind of love that feels so right until it doesn't. The kind of connection that feels like everything you've been waiting for. The kind that makes you let your guard down faster than you expected. The kind that feels like a dream until it starts to fall apart.
Welcome to Project Loving Myself, the podcast where we dive deep into the messy, beautiful journey of self-discovery, self-love, and healing. I'm your host, Sanaya Gurnamal, relationship reinvention coach and love alchemist. The most important relationship you will ever have is the one with yourself. Let's start this journey together on Project Loving Myself.
Welcome back to Project Loving Myself, the space where we do self-love from the inside out, because that is the ultimate power move. Joining me today is Ginny Priem, keynote speaker, #1 best-selling author of You're My Favorite, master certified coach, and host of the Unsubscribe podcast. Ginny's work is rooted in her deeply personal journey, one that started out like a fairy tale relationship, but became a powerful awakening around truth, self-worth, and the courage to let go. In this episode, we're talking about the love you thought was real, how emotional blindness happens in our relationships, and what it takes to come back to yourself after losing yourself in someone else. Because love should never cost you who you are. Ginny, I'm so happy to have you here. Welcome to Project Loving Myself.
Thank you for having me, Sanaya. It's so good to be here. I love what you're doing with your show.
Thank you. And I'm so excited about today's topic because, what we have is our trust in ourselves. And when that gets shaken, that can throw our whole life into chaos. So I can't wait to hear about your story. So Ginny, give us like a quick kind of background on what happened with you and how this led you to be talking about what we are speaking about on today's podcast.
Yeah, I was working my corporate job, my big fancy corporate job, traveling for work, traveling for fun, living my best single life. And I was introduced to this guy, Chad. I was not interested for 2 reasons. Number one, because I just explained how good my life was and why mess with a good thing.
Right.
But he also had 2 kids. And that was just not territory that I wanted to venture into. I'd been there before and, it just wasn't in the cards for me.
Okay.
Well, spoiler alert, he broke down my walls and, we started dating. And like you said, it seemed like this fairy tale romance, like things moved so fast, just constant, like over the top dates, constant texting, just like always seemed like he was wanting my attention.
Some people call that love bombing. Is that what it felt like?
Well, not at the time, but in hindsight, yes, now I know that's exactly what it was.
Okay.
Yeah. And so we start dating and things are going great. He and his 2 kids end up moving in here. We've got obviously shared custody between their mom and us, going back and forth. And, instead of like stepping on the beach in Greece, I was stepping on Legos in my house and I wasn't even mad about it. And everything's good. Like life is good. Even though I never imagined like finding myself in school pickup lines and drop-off lines and packing lunches and watching movies on the couch on Fridays, I loved this like instant family that we had. And one day I was coming home from a work trip and a friend wanted to urgently meet for cocktails at 10 p.m. on a Tuesday night.
Okay.
So all day I'm thinking, what's going on with her? Is she okay? And I even texted her. I was like, is everything okay? And she's like, it will be. So I was like, okay, what's going on? And how do I show up and be a good supportive friend to her?
Right. Because you're thinking something's going on with her.
Yes. And so I walk into the restaurant and I slide into the booth and order a big glass of red wine because it was winter. And I reach across the table and touch her arm. And I'm like, I've been so worried about you all day. Tell me what's going on. And she said, it's not about me. It's about you. It's actually about Chad, the man that was at home in my house, in my bed, living in my house. And proceeded to display an arrangement of evidence about him. And it turned out, I knew if one thing was true, it was probably all true.
What were you feeling? What were you thinking? Like, I mean, that moment must have been the biggest moment of your life.
Yeah, it was interesting. And she kept on saying to me, she's like, how are you not losing it? Like, you must just be in shock, right? Like, how are you not sobbing? How are you not bawling? Because she was shaking and crying and
Yeah.
everything. And I think, on the way home, it was only like a 5-minute drive, but in that 5 minutes, it was like all of the times that I questioned my intuition and my gut started flooding back in my mind, going, there was this thing that happened, and there was this thing that happened, and he explained it away, or I ignored it, or I explained it away. And so I think it wasn't all that shocking. I mean, he turned out to be a fraud in every way. I mean, he was financially abusing me. He was, I don't know how many women, there could have been hundreds, like literally hundreds of women have reached out to me at this point that have heard about my book or read my book or seen, interviews of me on TV. And I've created some friends from some of them, which is really interesting. Some close friends. He is so grandiose. Like some of the things he would leave I had elderly dogs at the time. He would leave them while I was traveling for work and he was supposed to be watching them. So he is abusing and neglecting my animals. He performs chiropractic adjustments on people, medical procedures, even though he's not a doctor, and he has harmed people, which is, just thinking about that and the grandiosity of it. One of the women that exposed him, she thought she was in a relationship with him while he was living in my house. And he told her that when she heard, or somehow she found out that he had a girlfriend or partner, whatever. And he told her that I couldn't find out because the kids were on my health insurance and one of them had a brain cancer.
Wow. I mean, that is just like crossing the line, using your children and, saying that they're sick. I mean, that just sounds like a very, very disturbed person. Now,
like,
Ginny,
why would you even put that out into the universe?
yes,
right?
exactly.
I mean,
why would you invite such a thing?
Yeah, it's crazy.
Okay. Tell me something. Would you say, Ginny, that there were red flags? You didn't see them, or it was like when you put the pieces together, there was a story. But when you looked at them as isolated kind of, intuitive messages, they didn't really feel enough for you to question your relationship. Tell me what your point of view is on that.
Yeah, there were definitely red flags. Some of them like I said, were explained away. Some of them I ignored. I think I thought, well, that can't be possible. There was one time when it was at the peak. It was about a month before things ended. Okay. I was on a work trip and I was sitting on the edge of the bed and I felt like this wave came crashing over me.
Okay.
And he and I were texting and I was like, I don't remember what it was, but something felt off. And I remember him telling me he was so sick. For someone that worked in the health and wellness industry, he sure got sick a lot. But that was how he would use, like, that was his excuse he would use because people don't usually question it. And then he would tell his clients, because I became friends with a lot of his clients, he was a personal trainer. And a lot of his clients, then if he couldn't go like work sessions with his clients and then tell me that he was sick, right? So he would just cancel his clients, tell people he was sick, which was crazy. So he was telling me that he was so sick, he just couldn't be a dad that night. So he went and dumped his kids off at his ex-wife's sister's. And I remember just feeling, like I said, this wave crashing over me, like 7:30 p.m. He's like, I just need to go to bed. I'm like, even if you're sick, 7:30 is pretty early, right? And the next morning, I woke up with shingles on my face in my 30s. That is not normal. And it was, luckily I was able to get in. I worked in the medical aesthetics industry for a long time. And one of my dermatologist friends got me in. And she was like, you're so lucky we caught this early. You can kind of see that's my scar from it, from the one lesion. And like, you can go blind from it. So it was great that we caught it early, luckily, which is great. So don't sleep on that kind of stuff. But that was one of the nights that was in the evidence. And he was with this woman, left my dog, dumped his kids off so he could go spend the night. We had just gotten back 2 days earlier from a 10-day luxury vacation in Italy that, of course, I footed the bill for. And then he goes and does that. And when I got home, I remember going to the grocery store and calling one of my best friends, the friend that was with me the day that he and I met.
Mm-hmm.
And I called her from the back of a grocery store parking lot. I had to go to the grocery store and I called her and I'm like sobbing. And I was like, I know it in my bones. I feel it in my soul. And she was like, he would never do anything like that. Like to do that to you and his children, he would have to be a complete psychopath. Well, here we are.
I know that a lot of people, a lot of women are very aware of their intuition. We don't always listen to it, but it's there. Why do you think it's so hard for many of us to listen to what we know to be true? Like you said, I knew it in my bones, right? And I've heard this from so many of my clients, students. I mean, they know something's up before it all comes crashing down, right? So is it because we are eternal optimists, or we're just afraid to see the truth? Are we afraid to be alone? What is your take on it as someone who's been through this herself?
I think it's different for each person. What I can tell you for myself is it's definitely not a fear of being alone. I am single. I love alone time. And I actually think that's one of the biggest things. It's one of the biggest things as a coach that I recommend to people when they are going through a difficult time is not spend time alone, but spend time with yourself. Mm-hmm. So not just being siloed and being by yourself, but doing things with yourself. Like solo vacations are some of the most transformational experiences. And if that sounds crazy, if you're like, I can't go on a trip by myself, like start small. Like maybe you could take yourself out to coffee, put your phone away, spend time with yourself, figure out what you like, what you don't like, what lights you up, what makes you happy, what brings you joy, what brings enlightenment, like what really connects for you. I do think that as women, we are taught to feel guilt and shame for things. I think we are taught that we shouldn't be alone. And I think that's bullshit. I think that like we should be empowered to do what we want, right? Or oftentimes I hear people always feel the need to explain like, this therapist that I'm friends with, and I was just on her podcast, and she was like, I don't have children by choice. And I just think it's so interesting as women that we even feel the need to explain that, right? Like I think societal expectations is part of it. And I also think that we sometimes don't want to trust our guts because we don't want to see people in a certain way. We don't want to believe that that could be true.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. And I think that if we learned to trust ourselves more, I think we would make better decisions. I think we would find ourselves so much more empowered. And that's actually what Project Loving Myself is about, right? This podcast is about having a relationship with yourself. It's the biggest invitation to love yourself first. So I love what you said and completely resonate with that. In fact, I was talking to a client the other day and she was saying the exact same thing. She was like, Sanaya, I don't know how to be with myself. I don't know how to, just, do things with myself. I always want to call somebody or be with somebody. And when they don't want to hang out with me because they're busy, they've got other things going on, I feel rejected all the time. And my entire conversation was about, you have to remember that you're actually pretty fun on your own. And there are so many things that you can do on your own. So I love that you said that. But let's talk a little bit more about this idea of emotional blindness. Okay. How do we sometimes, because this is what you said, right? We don't want to believe that people, could do something as terrible as, what your gut might be telling you. We become so invested in a version of someone, the version we want them to be, instead of who they might really be telling us they are, right? So what are your thoughts about that?
Ooh, I think, again, this is oftentimes a female thing. I think that women have been conditioned to put themselves last.
Mhm.
to not prioritize themselves, to put everybody else first. I mean, man, when I was in that relationship, talk about over functioning at its peak. I mean, I, made the money. I traveled for work. I paid the bills. I paid the mortgage. It was my house. I made sure the lawn was mowed and the house was clean. I did the grocery shopping, the cooking, the cleaning, the laundry, everything. And I often say now, like, once you lose yourself, you'll never be willing to do it again. You'll lose anybody else as long as you don't lose yourself again. But unfortunately, sometimes what happens to find that is going through something like I did. And, the whole process of like returning to myself was really, really powerful. So I think it's a combination of that, like just women being conditioned to stay in things or hang on to things for longer. And I think that ties to the sunk cost fallacy. Like sometimes you're like, well, I've already invested this much, so I might as well keep investing, rather than, you never really hear anybody, like if they do end a relationship or they get divorced or they leave a shitty toxic job, you don't ever hear them say, oh man, I wish I would have just tried or stayed in that a little longer. No, they're like, man, I wish I would have let that go sooner so I could get to the good stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to draw attention to something you said, which I think is true for so many high achieving women, right? You can function at a very, at a very high level. You can do everything. It is possible for you to do all the things you did and probably do it really well. That is what high achieving women do. But just because we can do it doesn't mean we should, right? So what would you say to a woman who finds herself doing the same thing, which is she might be in a good relationship, but she has this tendency to do a lot more than maybe her partner in the relationship because she can, because she's a high achiever, because she's high functioning. And I know what ends up happening with a lot of those women is after a while, you feel resentful. You resent your partner for not, investing as much as you do. You resent being in a situation where you don't feel appreciated or valued or recognized. So what would you say to someone who's in that position and maybe has a blind spot around it?
So this actually is perfect for my framework, my filter that I developed, my intellectual property. It's called unsubscribe. Okay. And it's why letting go is the secret to getting ahead. It's a filter to reclaim time, energy, and boundaries at work and in life. And I think we find ourselves in that position of overfunctioning, of doing everything because we don't have like a filter to make better, faster decisions. We have decision fatigue. We're faced with so many decisions every single day. And sometimes we think it's just easier if I just do it myself or if I just do everything, versus filtering out the things that don't matter, that aren't contributing in a positive way. We don't treat our time and energy as more of a valuable resource than our money, which to me is you always make more money, but you can't make more time. And so that's really what this is designed to do, is help us make better, faster decisions so we know exactly what stays and what goes. So we can focus on what truly matters.
I love that. And I love that it's something that you can almost kind of go step by step, right? And just follow this framework and it'll help you make better choices, I would imagine, right?
Yes.
Now, here's this other thing that I have to ask you about, Ginny, because I see a lot of women do this. They fall for someone's potential, what they think a person could be. And one of my mentors called it like, women tend to go for that diamond in the rough kind of love, someone that they think they can almost make better or help them reach their potential. Why do we do that? Why do women do that? Because it almost feels like there was some aspect of that in your story, because you had this person, he had children, and you came in, and I feel like you created a family where there wasn't one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Any thoughts about that?
Definitely. I mean, it's certainly a coping mechanism, right? I think it's a coping behavior, probably from some trauma that we've experienced along the way. Mm-hmm. And that's not our job to fix anybody, right? And imagine if we put that much effort into our own development and growth,
Right.
how much further along we would be.
Yeah. And so what you're saying is it's not a bad thing. It's not wrong to be, lifting somebody else up, but never to kind of lose ourselves in the process. And that's something that I think you've said a few times about how we sometimes lose ourselves in our relationships and we don't even realize it's happening. So, any advice you would give to someone who, you're in a relationship, you want to be this amazing girlfriend or partner or wife or mother, and you keep giving to others, but somewhere you lose yourself. What advice would you give to someone in that situation?
I think we should normalize doing audits. I think we should normalize, just like we do financial audits in our life. I think that we should do relationship audits. We should do friendship audits. We should really audit on maybe, a quarterly basis and pay attention to those relationships. Like how I call it your emotional bank account, right? Like your emotional bank account. We know that feeling of money going in and out of our account, how good it feels when there's a deposit and how it feels when there's a big withdrawal. And relationships are no different. So paying attention to where that goes. And I think anybody that would push back on this, that in itself would be a red flag, right? Like, hey, I want to sit down and do like our quarterly audit of like, how are you feeling? And it's not just an opportunity to air grievances, but it's like, talk about what's going well. What is lifting you up? What is making you closer in your relationship? And then where the opportunities, are for improvement. And I think that we shouldn't shy away from that. I think we should normalize doing these audits in different areas of our lives, including relationships.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, this is something that I do, Ginny, with my clients is I make them do an inventory of all their past relationships. So not just the relationship they're in, but like all the past relationships. And there's always some kind of common theme, right? Some kind of pattern, something you attract all the time. And often that is more telling than we realize. It says a lot about what we might do next. And just having that awareness, I think, allows us to make better choices and then put that together with your unsubscribe method. And I think you've got the formula for, putting yourself in situations where you actually feel loved and valued and, the kind of relationship that most women want.
Now that we've debunked some of those soulmate myths, let's talk about what's holding you back from love. If you're ready to dig deep and discover the hidden love patterns that could be creating the challenges in your love life, I've got just the thing for you. Take my Love Blocks quiz and find out what's getting in the way of attracting the right person and getting the love you deserve. Just answer the questions and you'll get personalized results to help you overcome your specific love block. Just click the link in the description below to get started. Let's get you from love blocked to being with the love of your life.
Now, for a woman who is in a relationship like you, they feel like something's off. They can't quite name it. What should they do?
Run for the hills. No.
Sometimes the easiest answer is the best one, right?
Right. I mean,
I
sometimes that might be the case. It might be the case. I think that if you're feeling that way, pay attention to it. Right. I think it goes full circle back to what we started talking about at the beginning, your gut and your intuition. If something feels too good to be true, it probably is. Yeah. If something feels off, it probably is. And just because things look good from the outside, let me tell you, things for me, everybody thought my life was great. It looked perfect. Had the partner, had the big fancy job, the 2 kids, the 2 dogs, the proverbial white picket fence. But from the outside, if things look shiny and bright, but you're falling apart inside, that's more important. And you need to look at that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think most of us, we're afraid to look at the truth, right? So when we get to that truth moment, Ginny, the moment where you realize this isn't what I thought it was, you went through that. How do you deal with that? How do you navigate that emotionally? How do you take action? What would you say based on your experience?
Yeah. So what I did, I used kind of my Gin Path coaching model, if you will. And I kind of walk people through that. The first step is gathering. First, you have to like gather the information. That's what I needed to do, right? I needed to gather the information, make sure that I could see it from a clear perspective, and then be really intentional. Yeah. For me, like literally people are like, well, Ginny, what did you do next? I'm like, well, I went and got my nails done. Okay. And I've had people like leave book reviews like, she's so vain. I can't believe she went and got a manicure the next morning. The reason I did that is because all I could do, I was in such a state of trauma and shock and duress. All I could do is look at my calendar and just do the next thing.
Yeah.
And it happened to be a nail appointment. I was a complete zombie, but in that moment, it was probably one of the best things I could have done for myself, having someone hold my hands for 45 minutes and give me that oxytocin, that dopamine hit, right?
Yeah.
And then the next thing I did.
Plus, Ginny, just like from what you said, I would imagine that just doing what is normal was something you really needed in the moment where your whole life had been uprooted, right? And you needed that time to just kind of process, because there's shock, there's trauma, and you had to kind of go through that before you could take action. So I actually think, yeah, absolutely. Go do your nails if that's what, you had to do. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Tell me then.
And then I went and got my tires changed. Like, you know what I mean? It's like I just did the next thing until I could start to put one foot in front of the other. And I really started to nurture myself. So I started implementing things like meditation, which 5 years prior to that, I would have looked at you like a crazy person if you were like, I think meditation would really help you. I would have laughed. But it is now one of the most critical things that I have implemented in my life. I started journaling. I did some deep inner child work, right? Like, there's all of these different things that you can do to kind of nurture yourself, whatever that looks like for you.
Yeah.
And I had to just be really gentle with myself and give myself a lot of grace until I could kind of, navigate the next best steps forward.
Beautiful. And this is, I think, one of the biggest questions for our conversation. After you've had your trust broken, after something as devastating as that happens, how do you rebuild trust in yourself? Especially after feeling like you can't even count on your own self, or you didn't trust your intuition. What does one do?
Well, I think once you ignored your intuition and it was right, and you don't follow it in something big like this happens, you never don't trust your intuition again. Like once you realize it had your back the whole time, it's pretty easy to go, okay, I'm going to pay more attention to that. Because there's been times where, like my intuition is kicked in and I have paid attention to it, right? Like I got followed by a man to my hotel room in Las Vegas once, and I knew something was off. I could feel him follow me. I turned around, he was there. And immediately my intuition kicked in and I was like, oh, I said out loud, oh, I'm on the wrong floor. Turned around, walked back past him to the elevator bank. And when I looked out of my peripheral vision, he had turned around and was walking back as well. So like when it protects us and then when we ignore it, when it's trying to protect us, it's pretty easy to realize, oh, it was him I shouldn't have been trusting. It was myself that I should have been trusting. And when you start to trust yourself again, that becomes much easier to know who you can trust. And so like, I think sometimes people usually ask me the question, well, how do you learn to trust other people again? And that's through trusting yourself.
Yeah. I just did an episode actually last week about how you almost don't need to trust anyone else. As long as you trust yourself, you'll be okay. But I think sometimes we get so caught up in the situation or hating someone or just, resisting where we are, that we don't take the lessons that you took, which was the most important one, that next time I'm not going to ignore my intuition. And almost, that is such a big lesson. Nothing makes what you went through okay, but it also feels like who you are today is because of all of that. Anything that resonates with you?
Oh my gosh. 1 bazillion percent. I absolutely would not be who I am today. I needed to do this work on myself and for myself. It's unfortunate, the circumstances, but it really led me to a lot of the heart and the core of why I was making the decisions I was, why I was surrounding myself with the people that I was. And it goes back to my family of origin. I grew up in a narcissistic household. So I chose a very narcissistic industry to work in, medical aesthetics, facial injectables. I had like my best friends that I surrounded myself with, the family members I surrounded myself with, the partners I picked. And it all goes back to that. Just because something is familiar doesn't mean it's good. There's comfort in familiarity, but sometimes I had to break those patterns. I had to do some major house cleaning and unsubscribe from a lot so that I could make room for what was actually aligned with me.
So beautifully said, Ginny. And, you stand for that. When I look at you, I see someone who has clearly done the work and almost has come out as the real version of who you were supposed to be. So, so happy, Ginny, to have you on the show, to be sharing this with other women, because I know this is something that is so important for all of us to hear. How do people find you, Ginny, if they want to be coached by you, if they want to learn more about your unsubscribe method? Where do they find you?
I like to keep things easy, Sanaya. My website is my name, Ginny Priem, GINNY, PRIEM. And that's my handle on Instagram, YouTube, and all of the social platforms.
Beautiful. Now, the last thing I ask every guest is, what is your Project Loving Myself mantra, message that you'd like to share with our listeners? The floor is yours.
So the way I end my first book, You're My Favorite, is I'm on a trip, and it really was kind of like a really pivotal moment. I was on vacation with a friend, and I remember kind of taking a glance at myself in the mirror. We're getting ready to go to dinner. And, the book is called You're My Favorite. And I looked at myself in the mirror and like put my lipstick on, and I was like, you know what? You're my favorite. And that kind of shifted into the concept of my second book, which is a guided journal, which I called I'm My Favorite. So I love that whole idea of like coming back to yourself and prioritizing yourself. I do this exercise in my keynotes where I have, it works really well, especially when it's women. I just had a keynote the other night and have everybody write down the top 5 most important people in your life. And everybody gets busy. They're like, oh, yep, this is easy. I know. And then I always ask for somebody to volunteer. And it's always the same. It's always, my partner, my kids, my immediate family members.
Wow.
And then I ask, where are you on that list? And the gasps, people are like, oh, sometimes people cry because they're like, how did I not even, like, I wasn't even a consideration for being a priority in my own life. So I think that's kind of the message of, that I would love to share with Project Loving Yourself, Loving Myself, is that's so important, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I love that, Ginny. I mean, that captures all of it. Wow, this has been a really great conversation, Ginny. Thank you so much for being with us. As we close this conversation with Ginny Priem, let this be a reminder. Not every love story is meant to last, but every experience is meant to wake you up. Just because it felt real doesn't mean it was true. And just because you loved deeply doesn't mean you were meant to stay. Real love doesn't ask you to ignore yourself, doubt your intuition, or shrink yourself to keep it. As Maya Angelou said, when someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. If this episode resonated, you can read the first chapter of Ginny's #1 best-selling book, You're My Favorite, through the link in the show notes. And go ahead and connect with her on Instagram too. If this conversation made you think of someone, send them this link. And don't forget to follow Project Loving Myself so you never miss an episode. Connect with me at Sanaya Gurnamal. And until next time, you are loved.